You're listening to Tapestry, a podcast by a music lover for music lovers. I'm your host, Kelly. Join me as I learn more about the common thread that weaves throughout our lives, music. Welcome to episode 8 of Tapestry. On this episode, I sit down for a cozy conversation all about bagpipes with Casey Buchanan-Smith, who's a friend of mine from high school, and her husband, George. Both are members of the MacDonald Pipe Band based here in Pittsburgh and have a huge breadth of experience in the bagpiping world. We talk about plenty of things, including pickup bands, instructor loyalty, and you guessed it, the bagpiper at John McCain's funeral. This is a short sample of George performing a piece titled Cock of the North, a military march of unknown origin. So I am sitting across the room, with a coffee table between us, from Casey Buchanan-Smith, who's my friend from high school, and her husband George, and we're about to learn about the secret life of bagpipers.
I started when I was 12.
I did not know that.
6th grade. Mrs. Winans. She was a social studies teacher.
Oh, I remember her.
And you remember the old lady? That's what her name. It just came to me now. But she did a country report, and I did it on Scotland.
Okay.
And because my brother was best friends with Heather Trueblood, which I don't know if you know the Truebloods.
I don't know.
But she was the piper for the pipe band at that time. And her teacher was Patrick Regan, the bagpiper who taught at Carrick.
All I really wanted to ask, just as an introduction sort of, was because I know very little about the bagpiping community, was just like, so obviously you get to high school and you're thrilled to find out that the mascot is a Highlander and that you can play bagpipes essentially as like an arm of the marching band kind of, but I want to know about all of your musical history leading up till then and how you found this. And then eventually, I know you two met through different pipe band stuff, but I need to be schooled entirely on the pipe band scene and like who's in it and who the movers and shakers are.
So, the bagpipe scene here in Pittsburgh is actually kind of huge, but also really fragmented. Okay. So, there's like rivalries and pettiness, which is kind of, but so when I started bagpiping when I was 12, and my teacher who taught at Carrick as well. Carrick had a legit piping program.
So nuts.
Yeah, and
so nuts.
And so my bagpipe teacher also had a youth band called Steel Thistle. And I don't know if you remember that I was I was in Steel Thistle quite a long time. So from when I was 12 until after 2006, which is when we went to the World Pipe Band Championships, and it was also the year that we went to the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. So
you got to do both, like two like major musical events. The same year. And
so there's kids from everywhere. They came to Steel Thistle, and we would go to the Highland Games. There are several local ones. There's one at Ligonier. Ligonier Highland Games is at Idlewild, and it just had its 60th anniversary. And that's like the big local competition, but then there's also one in Ohio, one in Southern Maryland. They just brought up some in Virginia. So we would go to all these Highland Games and things to compete.
And when you say competition in this sense, this is a purely, you are competing against other bagpipers to bagpipe the best out of the other bagpipers. It's not like a drum corps or a marching band thing. It's a purely musical art form kind of.
I was gonna say it's more like a marching band.
It's like a marching band
because it's pipe bands.
Yeah, it's like the one that I think a lot of people know, isn't it? What's the band that's like the secret drum corps or whatever?
Oh, the top secret Swiss drum corps.
Yeah. It's kind of like that. It's the regimented stuff.
Sort of. So, there are 5 grades to competition.
Okay.
So, in marching band terms, like, the grade 1 in marching band would be like our grade 5. So grade 5 is the bottom rung.
They're flipped, sort of. Okay.
Grade 5 is like the beginners, and the bands that have just started to compete.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are different requirements for that are kind of easy. So
So as you move up, so when you go from grade 5 to grade 4, you're required to have 2 tenor drummers. So they do the flourishing tenors, not like marching band tenors, but they have a single drum and they do flourishing with
which is
soft.
basically a mallet on a string.
The showy, stuff that guys.
It's a mallet on a string.
But it's basically there's minimum number of pipers and drummers as a requirement. So you have to meet the minimum numbers in order to compete at that grade level, and then you need to play. There's certain musical requirements too. So you'll have a march spay reel. Typically they'll say MSR in piping, so it's a march spay. So march it's a 2/4 march, and then a spay, which is a dance tune. That's usually what they do, like the Highland Fling to.
Okay.
Typically, and then there's a reel at the end, which is a cut time dance tune usually.
Yeah, it's usually.
And so, is there a relationship between the pipe band stuff and Highland dancing, or we can come back?
We can come back to that.
I was gonna say it's probably a whole other can of worms.
That's a whole other. Yeah.
So, what you're judged on in the bagpipe band competition is how well the pipe corps plays together and is in tune, and their cleanliness and expression. How well the drum corps, which is the snare drum, the tenor drum, and the bass drum, how well they're in sync. And then there's another judge that judges how both corps work together, and that's called the ensemble judge.
Oh, so it is just like Drum Corps International.
Yeah,
they
essentially.
Do they have like an on-field judge, or is
Well, it's just so you march into a circle. Well, you march in rank and file, and then you have to get into a circle.
And then
you stand there.
Yeah, and then you stand.
And then you stand there until you're done for about 2 minutes, and the judges just walk around you.
Got it.
And so you get upgraded by winning competitions and your score sheets, and there's a music board that you have to submit to. So if your band's not doing too well, or all the drummers leave, the music board will downgrade you.
So there's various worldwide organizations that do the adjudicating arm of piping.
Okay.
So if you go to Scotland, it's the Royal Scottish Pipe Band Association. So they're responsible for Scotland and Ireland, and actually Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
And then in the U.S., it's broken up because it's so big here. The biggest one is the Eastern United States Pipe Band Association.
And that's the East Coast,
yeah, like
plus
our
Florida
jurisdiction.
and
Plus
Texas.
Okay.
Which is
sure.
weird. But then
Why
there's
not?
the Midwest, and then there's West Coast. And
Makes
Canada's broken up into, there's Ontario, there's Nova Scotia, and then they have like a West Coast one of their own.
and they're the people that set the rules and things like that. You have to wear a kilt, or at least dress smartly.
Well,
Dress
you're
smartly.
you're required to wear Highland attire. Bands
Highland attire.
typically wear a band uniform, so they wear matching kilts with the same tartan, ties. Usually it's a vest, shirt and tie, Glengarry. That's the hat that you wear.
Yeah, the hat that we always wore with the tails on the back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can imagine it now, and I'm like, there are so many things that probably have their own name that I don't know what they're called. I don't know what they're called.
We're just scratching the surface.
Oh yeah.
Well, I had in my notes, I was like, I will need a primer on the competitive pipe band scene.
So-
Feel free to educate me in every way.
So, that's the band scene, and you have, there are no grade 1s here in the States.
Currently.
There
There
used to be. There was one for Washington, D.C., and one in L.A. And it's really hard to keep them together because of the distance. Where in Scotland, the entirety of Scotland fits inside Pennsylvania, so
True.
people don't have to travel as far to do pipe band and things like that, and that's why it's really hard to keep grade ones together. So there's
it's typically people traveling over very long distances to compete.
Yeah.
Is it like a season for it in particular, kind of like marching band?
Here in the States there is. It starts in April. There's a couple of winter indoor ones in like March and February.
They're typically more solo competitions though.
Yeah, those are solos. So, and we'll get to that.
Mm-hmm.
But, so the band competitions usually start in April here in the East Coast because of the snow and whatever. And then they end I think the last one's in October, and then there's a couple of other ones.
It kind of goes more spring, early summer, and then it kind of
peters out
around July because it gets too hot. That's the issue. And then
wool uniforms.
Well, and the bagpipes don't like heat either.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
I can attest to that. I'll talk more on that later from my deployment to the Middle East. But
yeah.
But it typically peters out around July, but also August is when the World Pipe Band Championship is. So
most people are away.
How kind of them to have the World Pipe Band Championships when you're in a wool uniform with
that's in Scotland.
A hot bag.
Scotland is like 68 degrees all year round.
Yeah, it's a lot cooler in Scotland than it is here, especially in August.
And we can talk about the Worlds as well, but with the competitive, we can maybe talk about the solo.
Yeah.
So, in addition to the band competitions, there are solo competitions where it's just you and your bagpipe in front of a judge marching back and forth in the mud. And you're awarded points based on the place that you get. If you get first, second, third, fourth, fifth, or sixth. In 4th through 6th, you don't get a medal, but you get points. And the more people you're competing against, the more points you get.
It's also graded like the bands, so it goes 5 through 1. Now those are the amateur. They consider that the amateur class.
Yeah. Then there's the professional elites, and
or open
we have
grade.
a lot of open grade people here in Pittsburgh. The guy that teaches at CMU is like the guy that wins everything.
So they're like the creme de la creme.
Yeah,
bagpipers.
They're like Phantom or Blue Devils.
Yeah.
You know, like they're the people that like they know they've won, so they just leave, and then somebody else comes by and gets
their prizes. Yeah.
I need a shopping cart kind of thing.
Well, I mean, I would say the reason why there's so many good professional grade players in Pittsburgh is because of Carnegie Mellon University. They have a degree program for piping.
Right.
Yeah.
Are they completely unique in that in the United States?
Not anymore.
It's just funny because, George, I'm looking at, actually both of you guys are wearing Edinburgh
University
stuff. and like, I know Pittsburgh has such a tie to Scottish ancestry and Scottish immigrants. I mean, that's got to be a huge reason why the bagpipe familiarity is what it is in Pittsburgh. It's such a weird thing to think of that Pittsburgh would be like a central hub for bagpiping, but
I think it's mostly centered around Carnegie Mellon and a lot of people that came here to study. My teacher, Patrick, he just moved back to Texas, but he was the first person to get that degree from Carnegie Mellon in 1992.
Huh.
And then there was Lyric Todkill. He used to live in Bethel Park, and I think Pat Neff took lessons from him for a while. He now lives in Texas.
I mean, it's got to be a very tight-knit scene. Like, you probably are, like, out and about and you run into other people and who they all, you know, pipers know pipers and stuff.
I was talking to somebody online because I follow some Scottish people on YouTube, and they had a piper in one of their videos, and I was like, I wonder if I know that guy. And they were like, there are tons of pipers in the world. You can't know everyone. So, I mean, bands in the area. We're part of the MacDonald Pipe Band. We've been around for over 50 years at this point. They used to be Carnegie Tech. Seton Hill University they sponsor a pipe band now. Hannah Whitaker and her mom were in that one.
Yeah, I know they used to do one too.
Yeah, her mom still does the tenor for them. And they were kind of, the pipe major of that was kind of, I don't know, there was a little bit of animosity between Seton Hill and MacDonald.
For a long time.
And I think they've finally gotten over that.
Yeah.
So,
this is some of the pettiness that
Yeah, I'm very curious about this because to me it seems like bagpipers would be like the friendliest, most demure, nice and kind individuals possible.
I'd say it's more of a carryover of the clan warfare from Scotland.
just
there can only be one Highlander. I hate it.
Essentially, and then I mean you have like
there's Balmoral.
There's Balmoral, and us Balmoral and Steel Thistle used to not get along, but now like Steel Thistle doesn't exist anymore.
You guys don't go into battle with bagpipes, do you? Like,
no.
I thought there might be like some SCA or Renaissance Fair type of stuff associated with it, maybe where you guys just like raise a flag and
yeah. No, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on and that I don't necessarily want to get into in case people listen.
Yeah. We won't name any names.
Yeah, we won't name it. But a common thing, at least, that drummers are coveted. They're like gold. If you're
same in the metal scene. Every drummer I know plays in like 4 bands.
If you're you can only play in one band competitively. So, and that's just the rules. And you can't, an upper grade drummer can't come down and be in a lower grade if they're not an instructor.
So when you commit to a pipe band as a drummer, you're in it. That's it.
Unless you want to switch and then screw the pipe band. And what can happen is an entire corps will up and leave and go to another band.
Oh shit!
And then because there are minimum requirements,
there's a lot of loyalty towards instructors is what happens. And actually, I think that's the root cause of a lot of the animosity in Pittsburgh. Because you have a couple powerhouse instructors, and they have their little group of students. So of course their students are loyal to that instructor. So whatever that instructor does is kind of what goes.
Right. So it's
not like that everywhere, but that's just what's happened
sometimes here.
At least that's my theory.
Well, that's our experience. I'm sure it happens in other places. But yeah, if an entire corps gets up and leaves, the pipe band might not be able to compete for another year.
So that's a really easy way to just wound a group right away.
Yeah.
Like, hey, good luck competing when you don't have an entire drum corps.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so that's just... MacDonald went through that twice. And we're like, come drum with us.
like in a rebuilding phase kind of?
Yeah, okay. And the guy that we have teaching our band now, firstly, he went to Juilliard.
Oh, okay.
He's a percussion doctorate.
Damn.
And weird and awesome and amazing. Like, think about all the drummers and how they were in marching band, and like, that's Richard. But he's the percussion instructor at CMU as well. And he's a genius. And I will say that if he hears it.
Good job, Richard. I don't know you, but great.
No, he's really great, and but he's been really helping our new drummers out. We need more tenors so that we can compete in the upper grade now. And one year, so they have the annual general meeting of the Piping Association. We went one year, never again. Never again.
Are you talking about the
pipe band politics? The
AGM?
Yeah.
For USPBA? That was something else.
And it was like 4 hours of arguing about whether or not something stupid should be passed or not.
I mean, that sounds like politics anywhere, regardless of musical or not. But,
it was.
Well, I'm curious though now. Like, you guys are both in the MacDonald Pipe Band, but then I actually don't know if I ever knew this. But how did you two meet?
Oh, so maybe we should backtrack and George can tell you his pipe story.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Actually.
So, I went to Valley Forge Military Academy in college, and
Did you grow up out that way?
In the Philadelphia area. That's where I'm
Westchester.
originally from. Westchester,
Cool.
Dubsea, Bam Margera. That's what it's mostly known for.
Bam Margera?
That's
He's
where
from there?
he's
I
from
didn't know
Westchester.
that.
Yeah.
What?
So I used to get that all the time. It's like, hey, do you know Bam?
Do you know Bam?
Do you know Bam? It's like, you know how big my town is? It's like, come on, man. But no, I came into piping a bit late. A lot of people start piping either when they're kids, like usually between 10, 12, middle school, early high school. And then a lot of people in the United States will pick it up later on, like in their 40s
35,
and 50s.
45.
Yeah. I started when I was 21. That's when I actually started taking pipe lessons. But I actually got involved with the pipe band before that as a drummer.
Yeah.
So I actually started as a drummer.
When
in
I
pipe
met
band.
him, his AIM name was Highland Drum Boy.
Okay, it's Highland Drum Boy 0.
Duh.
God.
And then he changed it to Will Piper Beer.
So I went there, and I was in our brass band. I was a drummer in I played the glockenspiel. Marching
very
glockenspiel.
cool.
Oh yeah, real cool. But what was neat was we did our own version of a tattoo, which is what they do at Edinburgh Castle every year in August, and it's like a big military celebration. Is probably the best way to put it. So you have a lot of brass bands, pipe bands, drill teams will be there, just all kinds of different performances, and
it's not like a religious ceremony or anything.
No, it's not religious.
The tattoo, it's more just like a military pomp and circumstance.
Got it.
Pretty much, that's what it is. Yeah. So our band. So there was the local pipe band there. Was the Washington Memorial Pipe Band, and at the time, my history teacher, Dr. Townsend, he was actually a Valley Forge alumni as well, and a veteran, and he would always start class off with, "Hey, Washington Memorial has practice on Monday nights. If anyone's interested and wants to check out the pipe band, come on up, check it out." So, so one of our drummers was going up there, and I'm like, "Oh well." He's like, "Come on up, check it out." So I went up there, and I thought, "This is really cool." So Dr. Townsend's up there. He's actually teaching us how to play snare in the Highland style. It's actually a lot different than like core style or Swiss style.
Do you have like the over the shoulder slings like
No,
one
most
like
people-
that?
No, they've gone to the harnesses
Marching
now,
harnesses.
but we still play traditional grip. So I got involved with that, and then eventually, because it was a 2-year college, I had to finish my degree elsewhere. So I went to Edinburgh University of Pennsylvania to finish my degree, and they're the Fighting Scots.
Yeah.
So they had a student pipe band. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to go there, is I wanted to continue pipe band. And when I got there, you couldn't take Scottish snare for credit, but you could do pipe lessons for credit. So that's when I switched to pipes.
Interesting.
And I started up there in 2006. That's when I started playing pipes.
Yeah, actually, he was playing the bass drum the day that I went up for music major for a day in 2007. I was still...
Oh, get out. So you guys actually knew each other when you were still,
No, I didn't. I remember distinctly wanting to go over and say hi, but not.
And now you're married.
Yeah.
Yep.
Funny how things work out.
But, so
that's pretty much how I got involved with it. And then towards my last year of school, that's when I met Casey.
yes.
Yeah, because you were in Edinburgh for a while.
Yeah,
studying graphic design.
Actually, I started as a music major.
Oh, true. Yeah. Okay,
For
I always
the
forget
first-
about that.
For the first 2 semesters, I thought, oh yeah, I'll do the clarinet and I'll teach music, because my entire schedule my last year of high school was just like band. I was just like, I don't have to take math, I'll just take band, it'll be fine, and then over that summer that year, like, that was when my dad passed away, and like they wouldn't let me take bagpipe lessons because you can't do 2 lessons, like private lessons, until you pass your sophomore exams. And then I had failed oral skills twice, which is like singing, clapping, things that you have to be coordinated for. And so that's when I switched to graphic design. But I went to Edinburgh initially because bagpiping was such a big part of my youth. And I had watched Pat Neff go away to college, and then he quit playing bagpipes for
because he went to seminary school, didn't he?
No, he went to Johns Hopkins and did Latin and Greek and stuff like that. Classical stuff. Yeah. And maybe he did try to go to seminary for a little bit and then decided no. But he stopped for quite a while. And I was like, I don't want that to be me. I want to go to Edinburgh because they had a pipe band there. Which actually, when I got there, we did the first parade I ever did. It was 4 bagpipers and 1 snare, and I was the only female bagpiper on campus for the first 2 semesters. And the Spectator, which is the campus newspaper, they called us that group of bagpipers.
Nice. Those guys.
Edinburgh University
those guys over there.
Yeah. But and then they were doing the auditions for the piping teacher. So so they were interviewing for the bagpipe position, the bagpipe professorship, and they needed people to be mock students. And
they couldn't find any students at the university to be students.
Yeah, well, they had to do like a mock lesson.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, they had to be a mock lesson.
I wonder where I could find some students at this college.
Yeah. So it was between Patrick Regan, my bagpipe teacher from my youth, who was the one applicant, and then this other guy, and I won't name his name, but he was a shortbread tin, like wearing the fluffy pirate shirt kind of.
It looked like the puffy pirate shirt from Seinfeld.
And,
great.
And he didn't believe in grace notes.
Oh.
But we were like, let's just sabotage.
So we sabotaged.
Yeah, well, because
Eddie Bagpiper you are.
Yes.
But it was
not that Patrick really needed that much sabotaging.
No, not at that point. But yeah, we were the mock students. And so then because we decided to band together and we both liked Patrick and all that stuff, that gave us an entire semester's stuff to complain about. So
a friendship was born.
Yeah, so a friendship was born, and I had a night class, and my English class was at night, and my dorm room that I stayed in for all of probably 1 month was across campus, and it takes me 45 minutes to walk across campus through the snow. So I was like, hey George, you have a truck, can you come get me from English class? And so in the middle of complaining and being picked up for an English class, we kind of became a thing. But my very first roommate, Spunky, she was one of my bridesmaids.
Spunky,
well, yeah, that's not her real name.
I know, but I'm just saying that's great.
Yeah, Spunky. Yeah, she taught me how to swear. Had to tell me you were flirting. Because I'd never had a real relationship prior to. Ta-da!
The man sitting next to you on the couch.
Yes. Because I was 18 and he was 23. So there's a 5-year gap there, but it doesn't matter when you're,
over 30 like me.
But yeah, luckily George got to meet my dad and all that stuff. So
But it was obviously this underlying love of bagpipes that kind of brought you guys
well, yeah,
together.
our marriage, which is going on 6 or 7 years now, this is our 10th year, because we were together for 4 years.
So crazy.
Isn't it crazy?
I know. I remember being at your wedding, and
Yeah.
and actually, your guys' wedding was the first wedding I went to that was a friend's wedding. That wasn't
Wow.
like a family wedding or something. And
Yeah, people are still talking about it.
it's crazy. I mean, I guess when you know, you know. You have the right person.
Well,
but
yeah, our marriages held together by bagpipes and weirdness.
and that's great. I mean, I just figure though. Are there a lot of couples in the pipe band scene? Because it is
quite
kind
a
of
few.
There's quite a few.
it is kind of an eccentric interest, and don't take that the wrong way. I'm just
No,
saying, I don't know.
yeah.
You're the only two bagpipers I really know besides Pat, but and the four people you mentioned.
Yeah.
But, I just kind of wondered this whole time, like, I know both. Well, you play other instruments, right, George?
I do.
You play anything other than that? Oh, yeah. As he points to some guitars over there, but
yeah.
So, was there ever anything along the way, like, that sort of made you go, yeah, I'm really drawn to the sound of a bagpipe? Because, to be fair, I think bagpipes get a bad rap, and to the average layman, they're like, they're out of tune, they sound like this. And I know that that's not true when you play it correctly, but what drew both of you to wanting to learn it?
Do you want to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
So I guess the turning point where I was like, I have to learn bagpipes was my parents took me to see the Black Watch
They came in 2006.
regimental pipes and drums from the British Army. So,
Oh, wow.
so every Scottish regiment in the British Army, they have a pipe band, and they get all decked out. They got the feather bonnets, the doublets, the horsehair sporns.
Yeah.
That's the thing you wear, from
The
kill.
Oh,
little
that's
pouch
what that's
thing.
called. Okay.
Yeah, that's
But
fine.
and then they were touring with the Welsh Guards brass band, so they were putting on a show together. And when I saw that concert, I was like, that's what really did it for me, because they just.
How old were you when you saw that?
I think I was.
Well, it was 2006 because I went to the same
So I was
concert,
21.
but here.
So you were kind of a late bloomer.
I was a late bloomer
in
piping
that
wise,
regard.
yes.
But had you so that was after you graduated from Valley Forge, right? Okay. So you already kind of had the sort of military, discipline and that sort of interest, and I guess adding music to it was kind of a natural fit.
Yeah, it just carried over. And the other thing is Valley Forge, the Corps of Cadets there, has a very strong British military tradition versus like an American military tradition. It has to do with the founder, Milton Baker. He served in World War I with a lot of British regiments, and he was a big Anglophile, and he just loved everything British.
Interesting.
So when he founded the school, he actually brought over people from the British military to be cadre for the Corps of Cadets. So that's where this British military tradition came from, the Valley Forge. So I guess that's a lot of the underlying foundation for my love for, basically everything British and Scottish. So.
Oh, that's cool. I kind of figured, like, a lot of people probably get drawn to pipe band because either, they have Scottish heritage, or they're curious about it, or it's not per se like, wow, I love the sound of bagpipes. It's more like, this is going to give me an opportunity to be in a group, but I don't play a brass instrument or something.
So, what a lot of people say, and what kind of happened for me is, okay, so I was really interested in Scotland and everything from that Scottish history report. My last name, Buchanan, is a Scottish clan. And so that year when I turned 12 in September, my grandparents took me to the Ligonier Highland Games at Idlewild Park. And myself, like a lot of people, they do amassed bands. That's where all the bagpipe bands get together and they all play the same tune and they march at you, and it's just like this
like a wall of sound.
This magnificent thing. It's like when WVU comes and they have like 30 tubas,
Yeah.
and you're just like, I want to be in that.
Yeah.
So that's what happens to a lot of people. They see the mass bands and they're like, I want to do that so bad. And that's what happened to me. And my grandpa bought me my first practice chanter that day. And then I found a teacher. And on my 13th birthday, that is when I got my first bagpipe. That
so
was
it was
like,
love at first sight kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I was an impressionable kid, but I really liked being Scottish, and I liked going, because even my brother was in marching band, so I always knew about the Baldwin Fighting Highlanders, because I would always go to marching band shows, and I would see his friend Heather play the bagpipes. And so when the opportunity came for me to, like, smash all that stuff together, that's what I did.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know the one year, didn't you play in the front ensemble? You played mallet percussion that one.
I played pit percussion the entire time. I was in pipe band.
Yeah,
not pipe band, but marching
but
band.
But in Baldwin's band, did you have like piano experience, or did you learn that all?
No, I didn't have any piano experience. For me, it was because I have a disability and a limp, and I was like, it's probably not a good idea for me to do the marching, so I joined as a freshman. I joined the pit, and I did that all 4 years, and it was awesome. I loved the orchestra bells. I mean, he likes the glockenspiel. I love the orchestra bells. It was just like...
That's perfect. That's perfect.
And actually, when I went to... I felt a little... Maybe I feel a little bit bad for saying this, but you know how, like, spoiled we were as a pit with Lori?
With Lori, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
everything was
the instructor.
Everything was brand new and like, fancy drum stuff. And
Baldwin's drum line, Baldwin's, you know, this is the high school I attended, Baldwin, so did Casey, but the drum line was always super well taken care of. Fantastic drum line, fantastic front ensemble. I mean, really, it was a great band to be a part of.
Yeah, and so I was in the marching band at Edinburgh for exactly 1 year because I was so posh.
Oh, I came from Baldwin.
Yeah. But no, I was just really embarrassed because they had like one xylophone and one vibraphone and they were falling apart. And I was just like...
just to be
I
fair,
can't work under these conditions.
in my entire musical experience from, I'll say, middle school up, I've never seen a working vibraphone. Ever.
Pedal never works.
Never
keys missing and stuff.
Just, I've never seen a functioning one.
It's not exactly like everybody's first pick, like, well, gotta get that tone right. I gotta get that really big vibraphone sound. But it's gonna make or break us, boys, the vibraphone.
Yeah. But, yeah.
No offense to any vibraphonists out there. Sorry. Sorry, I love you.
But it was just like, and here I am, like, almost 30, still playing bagpipes, you know.
Mm-hmm. But it's a huge part of your life. I mean,
yeah.
you know, but our listeners,
80-year-olds.
Our listeners can't see this, but I am staring at a tartan. There's a Scottish flag on the wall. There's a tartan across from me, and I believe
there's a
whiskey.
Santa bagpiper.
There's a Santa bagpiper, and I believe maybe the whiskey you were drinking was Scottish.
Well,
it's all
of them.
Scotch.
It's
yeah.
all Scotch.
It's all Scotch.
We're posh. We drink single malt, not a blended. And that vase there is from Campbell Pottery in Edinburgh, but we just usually keep our practice chanters in it.
The Pennsylvanian Edinburgh, or
yeah,
the real?
Edinburgh.
Not Edinburgh.
Real
Edinburgh.
Edinburgh. Okay.
Yeah.
The fake one.
The fake one.
The fake one.
Yeah, you're right.
The fake one. The fake one. So, what? Just thinking about your life and like how it's arranged to be this way, and piping brought you together. Like, what are some of the things that are kind of stereotypes to the outside world about bagpiping? Because I'm sure there's they're just like any intensely close-knit hobby, it's going to have its own jargon, its own rules and regulations that nobody to the outside world is going to give two shits about, but they just, you know, it's just how it is. Like, what do you want to tell everybody else about pipe band?
Well, I think a lot of the outside perspective of it is it's old white guys in kilts. They only come out on St. Patrick's Day. They're always out of tune.
They only play Amazing Grace and Scotland the Brave.
Yeah, and funerals. And then funerals. It's like a big part of funerals.
And as I had asked you to come out and play at that country club event, and I felt so stupid when I asked the manager. I was like, "Why do you need a bagpiper at this golf outing?"
Golf.
And he's like, "Because of the long-standing tradition of Scotland and golf." And I'm like, "Oh, I kind of forgot about that."
Yeah.
Forgot about that entirely.
Yeah, golf outings, like...
Which, do you know why that is?
Golf came from Scotland.
Golf was created in Scotland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And, so that's just something... But here in the States, it's like, if you've ever seen the scene from Friends where Ross plays the bagpipes.
I have not. But
Or-
is that the equivalent of like the CSI episode with the furry, and everybody now thinks that all furries are like the furry in CSI? Like
Probably
similar.
It's like they don't think it's a real instrument. Like, oh, somebody at the AGM did... Patrick, I think, he did his doctorate in bagpipe pedagogy from Durham in England, our bagpipe teacher. And I think part of it was you could go into a group of 30 bagpipers and ask them, "Are you a musician?" And generally they would say no.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Why?
A lot of...
It's
Like
because,
self-loathing?
well, a lot of people think that it's like there are kind of two kinds of bagpipers. There's the serious bagpipers that really care about their craft and their technique, and then there's the people that just have fun with it and they just want to drink.
It's more of the culture than it is the art, sort of.
Yeah. Like there's the artist, and then there's the like the drinking band. I want to go play bagpipes so that ladies will grab me up my kilt, kind of thing.
I mean, I get that, but I just, regardless of whether you like the way a bagpipe sounds or not, it obviously is a skill that requires a mindset of intonation and timing and every other prerequisite for being a musician. I just don't see how you could say you're a bagpiper but not a musician.
Yeah. And
you both are in the camp of I'm a musician.
I'm a musician.
I would hope so.
Yes.
I would hope so.
Yeah. And so and that's there's just a lot of like flack you get, and people, you know, you'll get people that are like, "Oh, it's such a sorrowful instrument. Why would you want that at your wedding?" Or
it's emotional.
It
It's
is-
very emotional.
it is emotional.
I think I have yet to appreciate fully bagpipes, but when they're played, it's kind of like oboe. When they're played well and in tune, they're beautiful, but they're so almost like dreary, kind of.
well,
I guess it's just not what in Western music your ear is used to.
yeah, I mean they're tuned really high.
Well, there's a lot of... I mean, can we get into like the technical stuff?
Oh, go for it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so pipes, they're not tuned to concert pitch currently. The pitch has been rising over the decades.
Kind of how like it's like A is 440
440 hertz,
and
yeah.
then it keeps switching.
Yeah, like right now, if you do A, low A on a chanter, it's like 480.
Oh,
Yeah.
So
Really
it's way
high.
up there.
Very
And then
high.
it's also a mixolydian scale. So because it's a mixolydian scale, the seventh
Is up.
is flat.
It's
No, it's flat.
Flat. Okay, it's flat.
Oh.
So that might be the outer tune perception that you hear.
Yeah, but all the scales are still in quarter tones or
So
whole tones, not in quarter tones, right?
uh,
You know, normal like
Yeah.
a scale has 12
So,
notes to it.
we
It's
get-
not gonna
we have
have
9
like 14
notes.
or something.
Well, there's
And
only
it's-
9 notes on the pipes.
and it's treble clef, and there's 2 sharps, F and C. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's in A or D. It's but it starts at the G above middle C on the staff and goes to the A that's 1 ledger above.
So that's a pretty tight scale.
it.
That's it. That's
all
you're
you
very
get.
limited with what you can do. And
Yeah.
Plus, you also take out dynamics Can't do that. You
No
take out
dynamics.
staccato. Can't do that.
The only
Can't
way
do
to
accents.
do dynamics on bagpipes is to have somebody like join you and add more
Oh.
bagpipes.
So
add more
it's exponential
bagpipes.
bagpipes. It's
Right.
just
You-
okay.
You either
So
add more
crescendo,
bagpipes or you take
decrescendo.
bagpipes away.
Out. Yeah.
The drums actually are what provides dynamics in a pipe band setting, because they're the only ones that can do that.
Mm-hmm.
So the bagpipe provides the melody, and the drums do like something that complements.
The musical color, I guess, if
Yeah.
you will.
Lights and
Lights and shades.
Lights and
Chiaroscuro.
Yeah.
That's a common thing you'll see on your score sheet from judges.
Because you
is
get a score.
lights and
Usually
shades.
can't read the score sheet because they're all just like scrawl is terrible. So after a competition, you'll go to the pub and you'll be like, "What does that say?"
Yeah.
That's usually what it's like getting a prescription from your doctor almost.
Yeah. Especially the drumming judge.
Interesting. Yeah,
Um,
see, now the thing that I don't know about either, but it's kind of characteristic of piping is the drone.
Okay.
Tell me how you play a bagpipe, because I don't know.
So,
Also, George, what is the thing called that you're holding?
Oh, this is
This
a
is the chanter?
This
that's
is
a practice chanter.
Okay.
So this is a lot quieter than a regular set of pipes. So you can sit. So when you actually start learning how to play the pipes, this is what you start on.
Yeah.
You don't
So
actually
it's
start on
kind
the
of
set
just like a
pipes.
little recorder with like a long tube type of mouthpiece.
It's essentially it's the same finger holes as the pipe chanter, and it has a small little double-bladed reed in it.
Oh shit!
Kind of like
I
an
know they had a
oboe.
reed.
Yeah.
Yeah, pipes are.
Have I not known this
Bagpipes
entire
have
time?
4 reeds.
They're a reed instrument.
It's a woodwind.
How have I gone my entire life without knowing this? I just figured it was a hole that you blow in and it comes out and makes a sound.
No,
No, it's a reeded instrument.
I'll show you the real pipe chanter.
But we actually had
My
to get
mind is, like,
matching
blown.
practice chanters because they were so out of tune it was causing marital distress.
Honey, tune your chanter.
I
Leaving
can't.
you.
So it looks like someone took a bassoon reed and
Yeah, it
chopped
basically
it down.
does.
It's
It's kind
cane.
of like,
Yeah.
okay.
And they're very expensive and
They're like
handmade.
Let me
17
throw it at your wall.
They're like $17 a piece,
Oh,
which is
and because
Every oboist listening to this is like, ah.
yeah, it's probably the same because it's real cane.
Yeah. Do you have to make your own?
No.
No.
Thankfully, there are lovely people now these days that sell them to you.
Yeah.
You can get. There are like the big mass producers, and they produce a lot of reeds. You can buy 50 at a time. A lot of bands will do that. And then there's like the little.
well, even the mass producers is one guy making
It's
them.
one guy making them. George worked at a bagpipe shop for a while.
Interesting. Was that out near Valley Forge? Or?
No, it was
No,
in Cleveland.
It's in Cleveland.
It's a
Yeah.
bagpipe shop in
There
Cleveland.
was.
There was.
They were bought out and they moved to Vermont.
That seems like a more appropriate place for a bagpipe shop.
But they were in Willoughby, Ohio.
Oh, I have a friend from Willoughby.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And the guy that made my bagpipes, he's out in Oregon.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's just him making all the. He made this. He does hand engraved silver for everyone globally. There are electric practice chanters that he does the silver for, because there are like electric chanters, so you can plug them into an amp and play with a rock band if you want.
Oh, so
Yeah.
Yeah,
because why not? Well, I guess like Flogging Molly or somebody might have to do
Gaelic
something
Storm.
like that. Yeah.
But anyway, going back to the more technical thing of like how the heck you actually
so
play a
the bagpipes.
bagpipe.
Well,
Yeah.
weren't they traditionally made out of like sheep?
Sheepskin.
So
yeah.
the bag or bladder was, and when way back when, before the invention of the synthetic materials and synthetic bags with zippers in them, everyone played
Sheepskin
a
bags.
sheepskin bag, and you had to season them, which means you have to like put like a lotion inside
Right.
the bag to keep it airtight. If something happened in the weather,
I'm sure that smelled wonderful.
oh.
It,
Our one teacher, Nick, actually exploded some seasoning in the cafeteria at CMU.
in the microwave
In the
because
microwave.
it comes in these little containers. It's called airtight seasoning,
Yeah.
and you have to heat it up before you pour it in the bag. So
Okay.
you typically just put in the microwave for a bit, but he put it in way too long and
you
blew
like,
it up, and
then
Alistair Gillis actually made fun of him for it for a while.
Yeah.
And they're really hard to tie in, and I'll get into that. Tying in is where you take the stalks of the bagpipe, and it's just basically a round tube, and that goes into the bag, and then you tie it there with cord to make it real tight. But now they have these grommets that you just push it through.
Cool.
Essentially a bagpipe is a series of tubes of varying length, all attached to a bag that holds the air for you. I don't know if you've ever tried circular breathing.
No, I wish. I would love to learn it.
A lot of bagpipers do that on the practice chanter. They use their cheeks as a bladder, and they just play for forever. I can't do it.
How can they not call themselves musicians? Like, a lot of jazz musicians I know don't even know how to do circular breathing. And
I don't know. It's just the headspace, especially here in the States, where it's thought of as like a thing that happens on St. Patrick's Day, because the general public only ever sees you in a parade or at a funeral, or
they have no idea there's this whole separate culture
of
hobbyists.
I would say the best analogy for pipers, and this is my favorite analogy, is I like to use the Harry Potter analogy.
Okay.
it's
if you're
wizards
familiar
and
with
muggles.
I'm the only human being left on the planet that has not read Harry Potter, but I'm at least familiar with the lore.
Yeah,
as long as you're at least familiar with it. So it's kind of like you were saying, we have our own little
culture.
It's actually even like a subculture in Scotland too. Like, it's not every Scottish person plays bagpipes. Obviously, that's a terrible stereotype.
It should be a requirement. They come out of the womb with.
Well, actually, there's a new program that they're starting to teach
to inoculate all Scottish babies
they're teaching. There's like a new school program that's government funded in Scotland.
In Scotland, not here.
Not here. No, which is unfortunate. But there are several other universities. So Dunedin, Florida, here in Florida, has a piping program. There's a high school in Bethlehem, PA, that has a piping program. There's a private school in Texas that has a piping program that's really good. So you'll get pockets.
Are these places, though, like, demographically speaking, that have a higher, like, Anglo-Saxon, Scottish, granted,
possibly
America's fairly white, but not a lot of people, when you say, oh, I'm white, it's not like, I'm going to tell you that I'm 69% French and, 25% Polish. Like, it seems like people who get into this stuff, they're aware of their Scottish heritage, and that's a driving force.
But you don't necessarily have to be Scottish, because half the people in my pipe band growing up had Slavic last names. Our best friend Adam is part Serbian and part Italian.
So it's just a curiosity.
He's not even a lick Scottish.
Yeah. Or Irish.
Or Irish. And he plays in an Irish punk band.
That's awesome.
The Low Kings.
The Low Kings.
Check them out if you get a chance.
Okay, the Low Kings.
They usually play at
the claddagh and the harp.
That's very Scottish.
Yeah,
that's very Irish.
Irish.
But he likes to play Country Roads on the bagpipe for me. It sounds amazing.
That's cool, though.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's a group that were the Red Hot Chili Pipers.
Best cover band name ever.
They're not a cover band unless they're a Coldplay cover band, because they play a lot of Coldplay.
You might as well call them a Coldplay cover band.
Yeah, okay. Why are they
Um,
not a Red Hot Chili Peppers band?
Coldplay fits better on the bagpipes, I guess, because they play clocks and chasing cars and
my head just started hearing that, but in bagpipe,
yeah,
that's all.
They're on Spotify if you need to check them out.
Red Hot Chili Pipers.
But they made headlines because I guess they had a concert. I don't know, last year sometime, and a lot of people accidentally thought that they were going to a Red Hot Chili Peppers concert. They covered that Avicii song, "Wake Me Up."
Yeah. Okay.
And it was really great. And because people on YouTube thought it was Red Hot Chili Peppers, that video got 2 million views.
Which is good for a bagpipe video on YouTube.
Yeah.
So, but they play a lot. Their slogan is bringing bag rock to the masses. But none of this would have been possible without, like, Fred Morrison. These are other names. Fred Morrison, Gordon Duncan, and Martin Bennett. And these people...
They like the rock stars of the pipe world, kind of.
Essentially. They're like celebrities.
They,
Gordon, they formed the style of music that we play today.
Okay.
Because prior to their... Fred Morrison is still alive.
Mm-hmm.
He tours everywhere. Gordon Duncan unfortunately passed away in 2005, as did Martin Bennett. But prior to them, bagpiping was mostly military marches, because there's this big military. That's where pipe bands kind of came to be a thing, in the trenches, essentially. And when Fred and Gordon and Martin started, like, experimenting with what they could do, like putting beats and stuff behind the practice chanter, they ruffled a lot of old people's feathers.
I'm sure.
And
well, it's a very traditional
instrument. Yeah,
traditional
and it's
music.
tied to a lot of history too.
Yeah.
It is, and I would say, like, Gordon Duncan really started pushing the envelope of the instrument. Like,
roughly when was this all kind of happening?
This was like 90s.
So pretty recent.
Yeah.
Fairly recently. I'd say like 90s, early 2000s. And remember how we were talking about those 9 notes before?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you shave your reed down a little bit and make it really easy, there's a way to pop, like when you play a C on the chanter, it's C sharp. But you can play a C natural by just changing some of the fingering a little bit, and then you can do an F natural as well. So that adds 2 more notes. So a lot of the tunes he wrote have this C and this F natural in it, and it just completely changes.
They're just progressing the art of it.
Yeah, it's really progressing it.
His first, maybe biggest thing was rearranging Thunderstruck to be played on the back.
AC/DC's Thunderstruck.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and you'll hear a lot of these, like, weird notes and stuff in the Bagad music that I shared with you. Because Breton is entirely separate. Like, we play kind of the Scottish British military style. But
so that Bagad Breach thing you sent me, I was curious about that. So that's kind of trying to describe this out loud. It's like a big ensemble of various pipers, but I was just confused because many of them are playing what sort of looks like a clarinet.
So that's called a
bombard.
A bombard.
Yeah, that's kind of a French thing. It's like an oboe. There's a reed.
It's like a clarinet, but playing it in front of your face like a trumpet, kind of.
Yeah.
So what's the relationship between that and bagpipes?
Well, that's a Breton.
It's a Breton instrument. So I don't know why. I don't know enough about Breton music to tell you why they played together, but yeah.
But you could say in a sense that's just sort of like another way that this group of musicians is sort of taking one historical outlook on piping, and they're just kind of taking it a different direction. And they were playing like
from
full
what
compositions.
what I've read about in Brittany and France, which is where that's the Celtic region of France. In the 1920s and 30s, there was a big Celtic revival in that region in France, and that they really got hooked on the Scottish Highland pipes, and a lot of pipers. There was a lot of crosstalk between. I mean, France isn't that far away from Scotland,
right?
So there was a lot of things going across the channel, essentially. A lot of Scottish influence on. Interesting. That's why they play the Highland pipes.
And it's important to mention that the Great Highland bagpipe is not the only bagpipe. There are bagpipes from Galicia in Spain and from Greece, and France
Bulgaria.
has the Bulgarian bagpipe, and the doodlesack
the doodlesack, the German one.
Yeah, and that's like a big giant one. It's like got a deer. It's like as big as
it's pretty metal looking.
It's pretty metal looking. Yeah.
So a lot of European countries have their own type of brand.
They do.
Bagpipe.
Then there's the Irish Uilleann pipes. I'd say they're like the second most popular bagpipe.
Yeah, those are the ones that you hear like in Titanic.
Oh, okay.
You had to bring up Titanic, didn't you?
or Braveheart.
But for the most part, when any American who doesn't know anything about bagpipes is hearing a bagpipe, they're hearing the Scottish Highland traditional
or
pipe.
the Irish.
Or the
one,
Irish.
which is
Ilian
one
pipe.
that has a whole bunch of buttons and regulators on it. It's crazy, and they like those instruments costs like $5,000.
It's a bag full of air, with a bunch
Well,
of buttons.
It's the pipes.
It's the
part that
pipes
are
part of
expensive.
it, especially if they're made out of a particular type of wood. And bagpipes have gotten a lot harder to make and transport across the ocean because of CITES now.
Because of what?
CITES permits.
CITES permits. So
Oh, okay.
getting it through customs, you have to have a permit now that proves that the wood is from a sustainable source, blah, blah,
for
blah,
God's
blah, blah.
sakes.
And yeah, so
It's kind of like the issue Gibson guitars went through.
Yeah.
With the different types of woods, like the different rose woods and all that, because blackwood, the wood that bagpipes are made out of, same wood that they use for clarinets, like really good clarinets. The wood is so dense that it sinks. It comes from the mapingo tree.
The mapingo tree, yeah.
It's from Africa, and the wood, the trees take 100 years to mature.
And local people use it
For firewood.
And
Oh my god.
But only 10% of like one tree is musical instrument grade wood, because it's a very knotty wood and it cracks very easily. So to get a good piece to turn on a lathe, and this now I'm talking about making
this is
bagpipes.
so interesting though, because I never. I mean, has it always been that way?
No.
Is there some underlying colonial like?
No. Well,
sort of
actually, there is
thing?
a little bit of colonialism
he was a
behind it.
history major.
I studied history,
This is
so
fascinating. I'm a big history buff, so.
So what happened was, traditionally pipes in Scotland, they were usually made from local sources, like apple and pear, like different kinds of fruit trees, whatever was local as they could find. But I'm pretty sure this is the story of how it goes. There was a pipe maker. His name was Henderson, Peter Henderson, and Henderson bagpipes are still sought after to this day because they're kind of like the standard for
Stradivarius of bagpipes or something.
them and McDougall bagpipes as well. But they're like very sought after. It's like the standard for bagpipes. And he worked in the shipyards in Glasgow. And at the time, the trade was going on, slave trade. So when the ships would sail back from Africa, they would load this blackwood into the ships for ballast because they were sailing ships. So they needed some weight in the ships so they would sail correctly. And what they would do with the wood when they got to Glasgow is they would just dump it in the Clyde. Because it was just like, oh, we don't need this anymore, so they would just dump it. So the story goes, he took the wood back to his shop and he started turning it on a lathe and making bagpipes out of it. And lo and behold,
what is the quality that makes it so sought after? Is it
how dense it is.
okay? So it's durable. And
it's durable. It's dense. It's oily when you turn it. It's very fragrant when you turn it. I can't really describe the smell, but it smells really good when you turn it.
Have you
on
made a
lathe.
bagpipe like from start to finish?
I have. I had
the way you talk about it, I figured.
I had a set that I made when I worked in Cleveland, but I ended up selling that set
To a friend.
to a friend.
A very good friend.
So it stays in the hands of
The people
pipe
we
family.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to buy a bagpipe over the internet secondhand. If you're not buying it through a shop,
You can buy a bagpipe second hand, but
Well,
Is it like a try before you buy sort of thing?
you
wanna,
have to look at it because you could end up with not a quality instrument. Like, you want to actually touch it, feel it, look at it, make sure that the holes are bored correctly and there's not too many cracks.
So this is a great segue to the statement you made to me, Casey, that kind of arranged this entire interview. After Senator John McCain passed away, you're both looking at each other like, oh, I know what she's going to say, but I finally watched that YouTube video, and basically that guy totally effed up and gave all bagpipers a bad name. But why? Is it a maintenance issue with his instrument, or
Well,
You would
it's
think he's a professional.
professionalism. Like, he should...
He sounded like crap, for the record.
Oh,
he
he
was
totally
squeaking
did.
notes, and like even more so than what you think of a bagpipe
So,
sounding like. It was just bad.
It's really, really unfortunate because he was the, like, what you would think of a local good bagpiper. But he,
Not from what I've heard.
not from what you heard. Well, he's heard some more tea than I have then. But he said, he was having a maintenance issue. It was like, but a real professional wouldn't let there be a maintenance
Right,
issue.
you would
with
check
something
that. You would
good.
check that before
Yeah.
you have the honor of performing at one of the most
On
storied,
national television.
national-
yeah, political statesmen of our era, and
it
going
made-
on TV.
It made like through the global piping community.
Oh, I'm sure everybody's like,
everyone
"What
was
the
like-
fuck just happened?"
Yeah.
Oh, you should have seen it blow up on social media because
Yeah, the
if you
bagpiping
follow all the
social
bagpipe
media,
stuff,
yeah. That's generally
So-
what our Facebook is.
From what I know about this particular gentleman is he was part of a fire band in Arizona, and
What is a fire band?
so
fire departments.
fire department. band.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
So
we have a couple here.
typically fire band, and I'm not trying to say fire bands are bad or
They're
anything
kind
like
of more
that.
recreational.
They tend to be more recreational. Some of them do compete, some of them don't. There's always that big rift between competition pipe bands and non-competition pipe
Kind of
bands.
like
But
competition marching bands.
But
right?
you know, but here's the thing: for somebody as high profile as John McCain, they really should have called up Andrew Carlisle, who runs the piping program at Carnegie Mellon University.
That's what you would think.
Who
And I
who
believe
plays-
John McCain was a fan of bagpipes,
Mhm.
and he would have
Yeah.
wanted the best.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, Andrew Carlisle played at the 100th anniversary of the Army Reserve.
So
Back in 2008.
So nobody to sneeze at. Like,
Yeah, he
He's-
plays with Field Marshal Montgomery Pipe Band in Northern. He's originally from Northern Ireland, and I feel like, you know, if my bagpipe was having some kind of last minute maintenance issue,
I wouldn't have.
I wouldn't have played.
I would have bowed out too.
I would have.
Yeah.
I would have ducked out in a heartbeat. I mean,
Like, can we do this? Can we like do something else for 5 minutes so that I can go fix this issue?
yeah, or just something. Or
Stall. Yeah.
no, I mean, when I watched it, I'm like, wow, they've really set back piping about 30 years. That's awesome. Thank you.
And it affects you, George, probably a little bit more because you are active in the military.
Well, it did affect me. It's like, well, even I could have done better than that. I mean,
Yeah.
come on.
Like, and from a military perspective, that kind of really upset us because that was like disrespectful
It
Yeah.
was.
to
To
not
to McCain's legacy too.
to not maintain your bagpipe to a degree that it wouldn't have a problem when you knew you were going to be on national television,
Yeah,
and then to continue for 5 minutes.
it was bad. I know nothing about bagpiping.
We
and I
watched
sat
it
there
for
and I'm
like 5
"Ooh."
seconds and then turned it off.
I had to shut it off after about 10 seconds. That's all I could take.
So what, like, in terms of the public perception of bagpipes, I mean, how do you think moving forward, like, what do you two do with your other musical activities and stuff to sort of promote it, or like, do you just kind of do it and you do it, like,
Well,
it's very important in your lives.
yes. So we play bagpipes. We continue to participate in band. Here in Pittsburgh, there's a piping society that just was started several years ago, but they that's kind of it. We invite lots of, like, the general public to come. It used to be at Cafe Sam over in on Boulevard, but they closed in June. Now it was at the Sharper Edge or the Sharp Edge.
Oh, Bistro downtown.
Yeah,
Love that
downtown.
place.
The last time we did that, we went up into the upper room, and like there's a session there. So what I do when I'm faced with somebody being like, "Oh, bagpipes are awful," whatever, I'm like, but have you heard Trail West? Or have you heard Gordon Duncan play? Have you heard Angus MacColl, the shepherd, who plays amazing bagpipes? Or do you listen to Pipeline? You know, I try to, like, tell people, you know,
where to find the good stuff.
Where to find
Right.
the good stuff.
And that's admirable, because I went through the same thing with rap. I just assumed that all rap and hip-hop was awful.
Cuss words and...
Yeah, and just nonsense, and then I had a couple people kind of point me in the right direction. Have you listened to X, Y, and Z? And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Because there's this other part of bagpiping which is kind of folky, where you play, like, the small pipes. So we play the Great Highland bagpipes, but there's also a whole culture around small piping with the bellows.
Yeah,
And
small pipes and border pipes.
And they're a little bit more free. They don't wear uniforms. They just, like, hang out in the pub usually.
The big thing that the culture that we're sort of segueing into right now is I like to call it session culture.
Jam session.
So when we went to Scotland last year,
last October.
So in Glasgow, there's two bars that are famous.
They're like meccas for
sessions and folk bands. One's called the Ben Nevis, named after the highest point in Scotland, and the other's called the Park Bar.
And the Park Bar's been around for at least since 1800s.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing how old these places
and
are.
It's no bigger than our house.
Yeah, the Nevis is really small, but
you can see the steam from people's body heat
because it's like a glass front to it, and then you walk in, and it's this really old bar, and when we walked in, there was just a couple of people playing in a corner, just like a couple fiddlers.
There's a guy playing a whisk.
Guy playing.
So you just walk in with your instrument and go, hey.
That's what they do.
That's like my dream.
Yeah.
You just happen to be able to drink and eat at the same place. But...
Well, it's mostly drinking, but yeah.
Yeah, and then the Park Bar is really, I say the Park Bar is bigger on having folk bands come in.
Yeah,
and play.
Trail West plays there a lot. They're like my favorite.
Yeah, you said Trail West many times today.
I like Tidelines too because Robert Robertson is like my favorite.
Trail West.
Okay.
And
Tidelines.
Yeah.
So there is a whole exchange of musical ideas.
So I'll talk about Kuwait. So I was deployed to Kuwait December of 2016 until August of 17. And while I was there, I worked in a coalition environment. And the one night I went out to play pipes, I actually mailed a set of pipes right before I left Fort Hood.
We borrowed a plastic set from.
Yeah, it was a completely plastic set, not a wood set at all, because it gets really hot in Kuwait.
Right, I imagine.
About 135 degrees when I left.
Oh, barf. Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. But so where I lived right next door to where I worked, which was a secure environment, and then right behind where I lived there was a coalition compound. And that's where all the Brits, the French, the Italians, the Germans were back there. They had the Australians, New Zealand. This really cool little international coalition compound. And there was this big parking lot next to it. And that's where I'm like, I'll just go out there and play. Because I don't really want to bug anybody. I just kind of want to go practice. So I'm out there playing one night. And we were allowed to wear civilian clothes on our day off. So I was just wearing like shorts and a t-shirt out there just playing. And I look over towards the coalition compound and I'm like, oh, that's the UK flag. Oh crap. And then I see these two British officers watching me play. And so I got a little nervous. But I kept playing. I finished my set that I was playing. They came over and they started talking to me. They thought I was from Scotland.
Oh.
They thought I was a Scot. So I took that as a compliment. Huge compliment. They're like, oh, so where are you from? And I'm like, Pittsburgh? They're like, oh, you're good for a Yank. I'm like, I'll take that as a compliment. So I ended up making friends with a captain from the Royal Regiment of Scotland. He was in the Three Scots.
Where's your hat?
Battalion. And so we got real friendly. And at the time, it was about February, the Six Nations Cup rugby matches were going on. So that's England versus Ireland versus Scotland, France, Wales,
etc.
Yeah, and Italy.
Yeah.
So the one night it was England versus Scotland, and his name was David Hamilton, Captain Hamilton. Everyone called him Hammy. Hammy comes up to me and he says, "Hey George, I need you to bring the pipes over." I'm like, well, what's going on? He's like, "Well, it's England versus Scotland, Six Nations Cup. We gotta get the jocks fired up. So bring them over." so I played the pipes before, and I played Flowers Scotland, which is like the.
Is that like their fight song, kind of?
Sort of. It's their unofficial national anthem.
Oh.
Because
Okay.
Scotland's not technically its own country; it's part of the United Kingdom.
Oh, flower of Scotland,
True.
when will you be?
So I
see
played,
again? Yeah.
and I'll never forget this. This is great. So I played, and all the English officers were like, yeah, they were like giving me smirks and talking shite, and so we go in, and I wanted to watch it because I like rugby. Rugby's fun to watch, and so when God Save the Queen came on, all the English officers and NCOs, they all stood up proudly, and all the Scots just sat down like this. But they had a brigadier general there, their brigadier general, and he actually got mad at all the Scots for sitting during the national anthem. And I was in civilian clothes. I wasn't wearing my army uniform. And he happened to come over and say, "Why weren't you standing for the national anthem?" And I said, "Because Pennsylvania hasn't been part of the British Empire since 1776.
I am a neutral party.
He liked my response, though. He thought it was funny. So,
Who won the match?
Unfortunately, England.
Oh, dang it. I'm
And
sure
it
you
was
rubbed
bad.
that in your nose.
It was bad. It was brutal. So then my other favorite piping story from overseas was I had to go to Iraq for a couple weeks. So I flew up to Iraq in a C-130, and I was at Camp Taji, and I was coming back from the mess hall, going back to my chew, and I heard bagpipes. Of course, I gotta go.
You have a sense for it, I'm sure.
Yeah, well,
That's how I found him the first time.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, well, I gotta find out who this is. So I find this old guy playing pipes, and he so I started talking to him. He was from Scotland. He was from Dumfries. He was a contractor.
Okay.
And he said, "Oh, you play?" And I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Do you have your pipes with you?" I said, "No, I left them back in Kuwait because I didn't want to drag them along with me or have them get lost or anything." He's like, "Don't worry about it." So the Aussies, they got a little pipe band. I've been teaching them. He's like, come over tomorrow night at 1800, and they got an extra set if you want to play with us. I was like, awesome. So I showed up. So here I am in the middle of Iraq playing with the Australians.
Here we go into more stories.
I know it's a bit
That's
of a
fine.
tangent.
I'll choose which ones.
But so we went over after he got back from deployment for 3 weeks. We drove back and forth across Scotland like at least 4 times because we regularly drive 6 hours to George's parents' house in Delaware. So like it's nothing for us to drive that long.
Right.
But my story is we went to Inverness for 4 days. Our hotel was in a place called Drumnadrocket. And we went into the town of Inverness to get our laundry done and just to kind of see the sights and whatnot. And George got to play on the River Ness, on the banks of the River Ness that leads into Loch Ness where Nessie is.
Yeah.
And
how'd you land that gig?
As he
walked up?
No,
it was just a park.
It's just a park.
And we found an angler's hut, so like an old fishing club. They have a storage locker with a bench along the side of the river, and we're like, oh, it's a bench. So he's playing, and 2 old guys. One was wearing a full tweed suit. They come up and they start talking to me while he's playing.
Not now. This is my dream come true.
Well, no. They were so cute. It was amazing.
They were funny.
They were so funny. They were taking the piss out of each other. Like, the one guy was like,
No, he said, "I'd shake your hand, but it's cold. Like I leave my hands in my pockets." And the other old guy says, "Yeah, he never takes his hands out of his pockets, especially in the pub."
and so
I was like,
that was so funny. Yeah. And we went into they have this indoor market called the Victorian Market in Inverness. And in addition to having the most amazing ice cream place ever on the planet,
the dairy bar.
The milk bar.
Milk bar, sorry.
Sorry. They have a wee bagpipe shop, which is the only bagpipe shop in the Highlands, or at least in that part of the Highlands. And it's called Caberfay, all the way. And so we go, and the proprietor is just about to close up. And we're like, hi, we're from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And we start chatting, and it turns out he's from Chicago.
What?
Yeah. He married a Scottish woman and then moved to Scotland, and he owns a bagpipe shop. And the next day, we went and we had tea in his shop.
Oh, that's so
and
cool.
Talked about all of the people that we both collectively knew.
What a small
And-
world.
And how our one bagpipe teacher, Nick, who's like professional he's going to be on Pipeline next week. And he got a hole in his bag, apparently, in the middle, on the way to a very prestigious competition. And he went into Brian's shop and was like, help. And so Brian closed his shop for the day, tied in a new sheepskin bag or whatever, and like got him going onto this very prestigious, which I think he might have placed in if he didn't win.
I think he did very well at that
He did very well.
Oh, wow.
But yeah.
That's crazy.
And so we were just having tea, and in this his shop window there was a sign that said, "Hey, there's a Drumnadrocket Piping Society, and the band practice is Monday night." Well, we were there on Monday night, and the place where they practiced was 10 minutes walk from our hotel. So we went to band practice
In Scotland.
in Scotland.
Hi guys. Hello.
Hey, guys. There's been a huge movement in Scotland with folk music getting really, really big, especially in the past, I'd say 10, 15 years. It's really...
It's kind
moved
of
on.
like the bluegrass here.
Has
similar, yeah.
any of that cultural shift in Scotland kind of come over here with like do you guys ever on a Tuesday night go, I'm gonna go take my pipes and just hope I can find somebody to jam with in a bar? It's probably not
I know
that.
Adam, our friend Adam,
yeah.
started a Irish session group at,
In
at a
Slippery
bar.
Rock.
In Slippery Rock.
Cool.
Because that's where he went to school. And then the harp on Tuesdays, we don't go there that often, but they have Cayley night. And Cayley is a Gaelic word for visit. And that's like the party and the dancing and the piping. And they're really popular in Scotland and Ireland.
Yeah, Cayleys are...
Yeah.
They're fun. There's also Cayley dancing, which is almost like Scottish square dancing in a
Yes,
sense.
it's Scottish
It's
square
a group. It's group dancing.
dancing. And so Cayley piping is or Cayley bands. You'll get the accordion, the small pipe, the fiddle. Sometimes a singer and
Whistle.
the whistle, and they'll. It's just a good time, and there's drinks and dancing and fun. And I remember when I was 16 and we were in Scotland with the youth pipe band Steel Thistle, we went to like a family Cayley, and we were doing, I think, Strip the Willow, and I was thrown across the room by a giant guy from New Zealand, and it was amazing.
It's just like, this is so eye-opening because I try to, like, I can just, I can see it in how you guys are expressing yourself and hear it in your voice, like, this is something you love very deeply at your core, and that's how I feel about metal, and it's so hard to explain that to someone, what it feels like to be in this group where it's like, everybody else is doing the thing you love, and you're just there in that moment kind of sharing it with each other.
Yeah.
And I just had no idea that there's this kind of parallel culture. Just a different style of music.
Yeah.
Totally. That's all
I
it
mean,
is.
I'm sure that's with a lot of people, but yeah, I mean...
You kind of have... I think it speaks to the essential, like, tribalism that we all have. You kind of want to like find your people and be with your people.
It's interesting that you mention your love for metal, because we have a member of our pipe band who is like 6 foot tall, loves metal, has a metal band,
Does it have pipes in it?
Or not a metal band,
no, he's just
metal
a metal
beard.
He's
metal beard. It's
he's just a huge metalhead. He's great.
Big Viking kind of person, and
he's a veterinarian.
He's a veterinarian.
Can I be friends with him?
Yeah.
But he's a cool dude. I'll hook you up.
Okay. Just didn't know if there's any crossover, because you think of like, I don't want to say socially shunned, because that's not the right phrase, but just socially and statistically smaller subcultures of music. Niche, exactly. Not like metalheads are a huge minority, but at the same time, that's not really what your average people listen to, these more extreme things. And
I can't tell you the last time I turned on the radio. I
haven't. Well, that's what I was going to ask you next, because I see Spotify's up on your TV. I imagine, sure, you guys listen to a lot of pipe music, but like what are your other favorite genres, and what's some of the stuff that kind of...
He has more interesting than I do.
So outside of Scottish folk music and outside of piping, I'd say my main musical interest, so like going way back, my parents, they're a little older. They came of age in the 60s. So growing up, I listened to a lot of their vinyl. So like the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, Pink Floyd, Zeppelin. Like that's the kind of stuff I got. But I'd say a band that really, really has still stuck with me is Dire Straits.
Oh, okay.
I am a huge Dire Straits fan. I love...
Well, you started your musical journey with the guitar.
I did.
Really?
My real musical journey started with the guitar, and I started playing a lot of classic rock stuff, AC/DC, Zeppelin, all that great stuff. And Cream, Clapton,
Cream.
blues, all that kind of stuff. But Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits, and it's kind of interesting because, so here I am in middle school listening to Dire Straits, and as time has progressed, Mark Knopfler, and I didn't know this until like fairly recently, he's originally from Glasgow.
Oh, okay.
And he went back to his kind of like he got back into like the Scottish folk roots. Like his more recent albums are more folky, and he's gone back and he's done stuff with Ali Bain, who's a famous fiddler. He's done stuff with Phil Cunningham, who's a famous accordion from Scotland, and I just think that's really cool that it's like kind of coming full circle. But even now, I went through my early 2000s
he had an emo phase
too. Like your Blink-182. I listened to that Sum 41 and all that other stuff.
Stuff we grew up with,
like in that time
I
period.
just remember though now that you and I, Casey, we both went to summer bright and early daycare together. And I think about half of my musical taste comes from whatever the this was like the, hey, your parents work and they need a place to drop your kids off during the summer sort of thing. Half my musical taste comes from whatever the counselors would just turn on the radio. So Backstreet Boys and
B94.
B94 radio, like whatever the hell was on there. But what else did you kind of come from?
Well, me, so my dad was also he would have been 68 this year.
He was a lot older than your mom.
My mom, they're 14 years apart.
Okay.
So, I was listening to the Beatles, a lot of the Beatles. My mom loved Garth Brooks like no other. Like,
I feel like I remember that.
She would, that was something, when I was born, my mom they only had one stereo in her house, and her sewing room is upstairs. And she would blast it on the stereo in the living room in the middle of the night while she was sewing. Because my dad worked nights, so she was alone with us. And and then I listened to WJJJ like growing up.
Yes, me too. Wasn't that the jazz?
The jazz station, yes.
My grandpa had. Oh my god! One of my favorite albums was the WJJJ sampler. It was like Joyce Cooling, Down to the Bone, like all the smooth jazz stuff.
Oh, I was so mad when they switched the station. So, and then I met George, and that was like, I got into the Blink 180 because I never really listened to, because I was always
Like all the typical stuff of like
rock.
all
early
that
2000s.
stuff. Yeah. Because when
Although
I was,
still love the Foo Fighters. I'd say they're like the last true
the
rock
Foo
and roll
Fighters
band.
are still awesome.
They're phenomenal.
Phenomenal. But yeah, I mean, I didn't really listen to a lot of stuff that wasn't bagpipes because I started as a 12-year-old, and like I was into Seven Nations for a lot of time. They're a Celtic rock group. I think they're based in Florida now, but and then. So I listened to them, and I listened to a lot of solo bagpipe players.
Hey,
I had a lot of solo bagpipe players, and one bagpipe CD that I would put on for my alarm clock. In the I was so nerdy.
You were entrenched in it.
Yeah,
That's fine.
I really was. But now, like, I listen to the folky stuff. I listen to, in the summer of 2010, I went to, and I counseled at Boy Scout camp. I was like, so I listened to like Breaking Benjamin, and Motion City Soundtrack, and like all this stuff that I'd never heard of, but like the boys liked.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is amazing. So that was what was on my SanDisk MP3 player.
Well, then this is gonna be a really tough question to answer, and this is usually kind of how I like wrap this thing up. But I always ask everybody. Each of you can answer if you had to pick 3 albums that you had to listen to for the rest of your life, and only those 3. What would your albums be?
Mine would be Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. It's one of them. Classic. Probably Trail West's recent album.
From the Sea to
From
the
the Sea
City.
to the City.
That's one of mine. Yeah.
So shared answers.
Yeah. And then probably a solo bagpiping album, and it would be Alistair Gillis, March for Spade Reels. It's just a CD of like non-stop March for Spade Reels, but he was just so good at doing MSRs, and his bagpipe was just perfect, and those 3. Absolutely those 3.
Okay, that's very definitive.
Yeah.
Very definitive. So you had your Trail West album.
Yeah, my Trail West album, same as his, because I that's what I listen to in the car, like, ad nauseum all the time. And probably like the Garth Brooks live album
From your mom.
from my mom. Yeah. And maybe the Beatles Blue one. I like the blue one. The blue album.
It's so hard.
I know I'm like a jackass for asking that question because it's so hard, but
that is a tough one.
It's really hard. Yeah, I get it.
I just love hearing what people answer because it's like, are they gonna tell me 3 things in their recent life that they're really hooked on, or is it like the formative albums of their entire career?
It's
their life.
Yeah, it's definitely like my Pink Floyd pick is because Dark Side of the Moon is one of those albums where you listen to the whole album to get the experience.
Right.
And there's not very many bands that do that anymore. Like,
it's kind of a prog rock thing.
Yeah, like the whole album tells a story. You can't just listen to one track. You gotta listen to the whole album to get the full story.
In a way, Trail West is like that.
Yeah, in a way.
The theme of their latest album is moving from the city where they moved back to their rural island of probably Eust.
Or Tyree. I think
Tyree.
they're from Tyree. They're all from Tyree.
the outer islands where you have to have, like, the banker comes in on an airplane.
Oh my god.
It's pretty remote.
Isolated. Very
remote.
isolated.
Yeah. So...
is there anybody that like you guys would want to collaborate with, whether it's on guitar or pipe or not? If you had like a dream artist, I guess that could be dead or living.
Oh man.
Oh jeez. I would love to meet Martin Bennett, honestly, but he's a piper.
It's not really collab with, because it's like I'm not at that level, but it'd be more. I'd say take a lesson from Donald McLeod, who's one of the most prolific.
He made the best tunes.
Tune composers of the 20th century.
Yeah, everyone plays a Donald McLeod tune.
There's at least one Donald McLeod tune in every
competition
band.
set.
Yeah.
Yeah, he.
Influential to say the least.
Yeah,
Very.
He has many volumes, and it's crazy how many tunes he composed because you only have 9 notes, and they're all really good.
You're gonna have to hook me up after we stop recording and just like give me a playlist of like what are my must listen things because I am really curious now. I like to see when musicians can work within a certain framework of limitations, like. You know, that's kind of where avant-garde stuff comes from. Like, here's what I'm gonna, like, these are the rules I'm gonna give myself, and then I'm gonna break them. But.
So, with bagpipes, to the untrained ear, a lot of the tunes sound the same, but once you kind of listen to a lot of them, you're like, that sounds different. That sounds different. So I think when we hook you up, we'll, like, give you a whole bunch of, like, the military marches, and then we'll, just for Seamus. And
so you can hear it.
Yeah, so that then you can hear the difference. Gordon Duncan, he's essentially the bad boy of piping.
Yeah.
He recorded an album almost entirely with the practice chanter, which was not done at that time, and that really upset one of the old fogies, and that's why it's called Just for Seamus. Because that old fogey's name was Seamus.
So you stuck one night bit. Here's for you, you old bastard.
Yeah, pretty much. That's how it went.
Essentially.
It's not a phase.
Yeah. So,
I kind of feel like I didn't even touch on like everything. I listen to so much music now that you really got me going.
We probably have a whole nother episode worth just about that.
You really could. I mean, I love electronic music too.
Me too.
I love
me too.
drum and bass, techno. I love it.
You would love Martin Bennett. We'll play some for you before you leave.
Oh yeah, I already have a recommendation I'm thinking of for you guys too.
He was real big in the 90s for doing like drum and bass bagpipe stuff. They called it ethnotech.
I've heard of that.
And he was just like, ugh!
That's
and it's
yeah.
It's funny because you think that something so traditional and something so new like techno music would not go together, but they do go together. You know why? I'd say 90% of piping music is dance music.
That's what bagpiping music
has
is.
a beat. You
it's
always
dance
know.
music.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be bouncy. The Highland dancers, you want that kilt snap.
It just works.
It
really does.
Bagpiping was created to lead people into battle and to dance on the shields of your enemies when you.
That's
kill
fucking
them
metal.
It is metal. It's metal as fuck.
It's metal. Episode over. That's it. Nothing else needs to be said. To bagpipe your way to the freaking oh my god, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. Well, you know. Everybody just leapt out of their damn chairs, but that's cool as hell. Like, thank you for informing me.
Bagpiping was originally it's older. I think it's still it's older than musical notation.
Mm-hmm.
So it was around in like 1200 or before. I mean, it's so old, and how people used to learn it was orally. Mm-hmm. So there's this whole singing type of notation called cantarock. And they would sing it to each other, and that's how they would learn. And these military marches, these 2/4 marches, 6/8, 3/4s, and they're really recent in the whole span of bagpipe history. And Pibroch is the historical music of the bagpipe that was sung and passed down. And people wrote pibrochs after battles, to salute somebody, when they were gathering. My favorite story of a pibroch is the Flame of Wrath for Squinting Patrick. It is the best story ever because what had happened was one of the clans killed this piper's little brother or something. So he went and burned their village down.
Okay.
He set their village on fire, and then went to the hills and played a 5-minute pibroch that was so angry and so metal. And it's called Flame of Wrath for Squinting Patrick. And so you get these all over the place. And people are very persnickety about pibroch. Pibroch is like the elite thing. If you are a good bagpiper if you know what pibroch is and you can play it well. And pibroch is kind of like a suite in that you have a theme and then you have a variation on the themes. And the fanciest pibrochs end with something called an amach, which is very bubbly, very kind of difficult to sound good. It's A-M-A-C-H, amach.
Okay.
And that's Gaelic for...
On the exit.
On the exit. And the most prestigious pibrochs that you play have these movements on them. So... But yeah, it's a historical type of bagpipe music, and people take it very seriously.
So, pipes throughout European history, like with music, the bagpipes were in some form, shape, or another played in courts, royal courts, and all this other stuff.
The Queen has her own bagpiper,
and as time progressed and instruments evolved into classical music and orchestras as we know them today, the bagpipe fell out of favor. But so the music didn't advance as much as it could have.
Yeah, it's kind of captured in time.
Right, but then Scotland, it was kind of held in a time capsule in Scotland because of the remoteness. Think of how remote Scotland is compared to the rest of Europe and Ireland too. Like especially in the west, the Highlands and the islands, which are like off the west coast of Scotland. That's where it really kind of developed and flourished, and that's why you get these really advanced pieces of music.
They've had nothing but time to work on it.
Pretty much, because because they were so separated from everybody else.
Yeah, and so. It's fast. That's part of the reason why I love to play bagpipes is because when you listen to it, you can hear the history.
Right.
Like, yeah, it's kind of there's only 9 notes, but you can hear the Battle of Culloden. You can hear, a clan. George plays one called "The Glen Is Mine." It is a pompous tune because. This is your Glen, and you are proud, and you are marching around.
Yeah, you're connecting to the history. Like, if you think about it, some person before you was playing that same tune in a very different context than you are now, and you're kind of free to sort of reimagine it how you want to, how it's relevant to your life. That's what I think is the really main beauty of music.
Yeah.
It's always going to be something different to every person, and when you find those shared experiences through it, like that's how we connect to one another.
Yeah, and when I was a music major, they said music is communication. It's musical notation is communication. It's another language. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I am like floored with the amount of history that I have now, and I'm a big history geek, so that was perfect.
It's gonna take a minute to like,
process.
No, I love it. I love it. I wasn't sure what to expect with this interview in particular, but you guys gave me like a run for my money on the history of everything. So thanks for letting me come over and school me on it. Well, I know who to ask if I ever have questions.
Yes.
Thanks again to Casey and George for having me over for the show. They did want me to give a couple shout-outs. I will drop these links in the SoundCloud episode, but I guess in a sense you could say this episode is brought to you by the MacDonald Pipe Band, and you can visit their website at www.macdonaldpipeband.com. And they also linked me to someone who goes by the name of Colin Keogh Bagpipes. He is apparently the bagpipe maker who is making some bagpipes for both Casey and George, based out of Oregon. So I'm going to give him some press in the episode links below. As always, thanks for listening.